Hey, how's it going? My name is Patrick with the Diabetes Management Group, and we are going to talk about the most epic, the most awesome, and comprehensive tier list of tips to manage type 2 diabetes and prediabetes, lower A1C scores, control those blood sugars, and have a phenomenal time with it. Now, this is a disclaimer. This is my own personal opinion. It may be very biased. However, I root my knowledge from the research articles that are out there, the scientific textbooks that are out there, as well as how it affects the emotional impact of people, because I love taking a holistic approach to this and making it fun and practical. So without further ado, let's get started on the best tier list for how to manage type 2 diabetes and prediabetes and some awesome tips with it. And who knows, maybe being consistent with this for 3 months can lead to reversing type 2 diabetes, and maintaining those habits can keep those habits to keep it reversed. I've worked with many clients, and one of the awesome successes that someone has had was being able to bring their A1C from a level of 10, dropping it all the way down to about a 5.3 in 4.5 months. He lost about 40 pounds, was able to regain use of his shoulder again with the tips and tricks that I shared with him. And it's gotten to the point where he's so happy with his results and progress that he's inspired his wife to do similar things, inspiring his kid to do awesome things. And now he's telling everybody, his friends, family members, to work with the diabetes group because of the awesome results that he's achieved in improving his life, both physically, emotionally, as well as mentally, and inspiring other people around them to be the best person that they can be and getting the awesome results when working with us. So without further ado, let's get started on this because this is going to be fun. So here's this tier list. The first one we're going to talk about is walking. So walking is really good, especially when someone decides to walk after their meals. An analogy that I like to relate it to is whenever we eat our food, it's going to be normal that we see a rise in our blood sugar scores because it's going to move from our gut into our blood, then it's supposed to move into our muscles, our brain, and our organs. And for people with type 2 diabetes and prediabetes, it's the root cause of the insulin resistance, where the body is having a hard time moving those blood sugars into the muscles, into the brain, and the rest of the body. It's not due to a sugar issue. That's a complete myth because there's plenty of research articles that shows that if you focus on having the same amount of calories to maintain it, it doesn't matter if it's a high carb, low carb, or those other factors, that the root cause is how the blood sugars are able to move effectively into the muscles, organs, brains, and everything else with that. And walking, especially after meals, does a phenomenal job in activating those muscles so it could soak up those high blood sugars and get those blood sugars back into ranges too. Plus, it's pretty versatile because you could talk to somebody while you're on the phone and having an awesome time with it. So that being said, I would put walking at an S tier because of its utility, volatility, and the practicality because of it. All right. So for the next one we're talking about, it's a vegetarian or a vegan diet. So having no meat whatsoever. I will say there has been studies that showed by reducing the intake of saturated fats, that does improve someone's ability to manage their type 2 diabetes more effectively and improving their health and overall generality of things. The issues that I personally have with the vegetarian vegan diet, it's due to having a harder time actually getting enough protein in order to sustain our muscle, improve the rest of our body's health, that it gets difficult when we're trying to only eat vegetables and vegetarian or vegan products to try and meet those goals. So with that being said, the other difficulties that I would say having a vegetarian or vegan diet is the mental health component, where if someone doesn't like eating vegetables and they tried the other habits to try and make it taste good and learning the other ways for it, but they're still struggling because they really love meat, then that becomes an issue. Since I prefer more of a, let's see what we can incorporate and utilize in our health and what we enjoy and putting it in there, I have to put this at a solid C tier. And the reason why I'm putting it at the middle of the road too is because the amount of fiber that one would eat when they're on a vegetarian or a vegan diet is generally a lot higher compared to those utilizing a different diet by itself. But either way, protein is still a huge food to improve one's ability to improve their insulin sensitivity, improving the growth of their muscles to actually keep things more sustainable in that way. So I'll keep that at the C tier. The next thing is learning how to read a nutrition label. So with the nutrition label, it's just information. It's not good or bad. It's just there for one to learn and be educated on. It's very similar to if someone is deciding to learn how to do math. Once you understand math, the world becomes a lot easier. We're able to understand our budgets a lot easier. We're able to understand how to tip servers appropriately. We're able to understand like money in, money out, and those investments with it, where it is the foundation and the fundamentals in understanding how everything works entirely. And by understanding how many calories a food has, understanding the nutritional profile of, okay, so if I know that 1 gram of carb equals 4 calories, 1 gram of fat equals 9 calories, 1 gram of protein equals 4 calories, and 1 gram of alcohol equals 7 calories, that makes it a lot easier in understanding the nutritional value of things and making smarter decisions and improving one's health, especially if they know how to understand and read fiber. Like by being able to have about 45 to 55 grams of fiber each day and spacing it between meals, as well as having protein where if it's 1 gram of protein for each pound of body weight for those without any kidney dysfunctions, then that has been shown to significantly improve people's ability to manage their type 2 diabetes and prediabetes, feel empowered, and make educated decisions on what foods or items to get to improve their health. So with that being said, I'm going to put that as an S tier. And then if someone does not understand what a nutrition label like item is because they don't know how to pronounce it, please educate oneself because there's plenty of words that are out there that people don't know how to pronounce, but it can go by a different name that's easier for people to understand. So a common example for this is someone could say, oh, drinking dihydrogen monoxide is going to be bad, especially when drunk in excess. Or whenever someone breathes in dihydrogen monoxide, that can cause suffocation and it's not going to be a great time, as well as choking, coughing, and a whole lot of other side effects. When in reality, dihydrogen monoxide, H2O, that is water. How silly does that sound if someone doesn't know how to pronounce dihydrogen monoxide or what that terminology is? It's mind-boggling, and people, from my perspective, should really take the time to understand what the other names something can go by in order to improve their ability to make more educated decisions to improve their health or making decisions to sustain and maintain their health. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about, it is going to be the keto diet. So no carbs or very low carbs, more in fats and moderate intakes of protein. And there has been studies that does show that this can improve the A1C scores. But if we think about it this way, how is a keto diet improving the A1C scores? Well, if we're eliminating the carbs, that means there's not as much blood sugars that's going to circulate in our blood. However, that's going to be at the cost of some brain function as well as muscular function because our muscles, its primary source of fuel is sugars, and our brain's primary source of fuel is also sugars. But whenever someone goes into a keto diet, they may suffer for the first couple weeks to 3 weeks as their brain is trying to transition from utilizing sugars as its main fuel source to utilizing ketones, which is a byproduct whenever we metabolize fat. And some people may say, oh, I feel clear when I'm in a state of ketosis. Some people feel awful when they're in the state of ketosis, and it's sometimes not a great option for them. Additionally, for those in the ketogenic diet, they tend to have higher levels of cholesterol and other fat markers in their profile. And from my perspective, it's due to more the intake of saturated fats. And if one isn't changing their other habits, like trying to figure out what supplements they could use to add in more fiber into their diet, that can be a horrendous time too. But if someone does have horrendous sugar cravings that they are struggling with the keto diet, I don't really recommend this for anybody for the long term because I've seen a lot of people who did not do well on the keto diet whatsoever, but I've also seen some people who has done well with the keto diet, but they still have some difficulties and frustrations. So it's up to one if they want to try and give that a shot. But due to the clients that I have worked with and my philosophy for taking more of that holistic approach and really understanding how our mind works with the food and addressing the sugar cravings, I'm just going to put this at a solid D tier. So because of that, the reason why if I were to choose between the vegetarian vegan diet versus a ketogenic diet, I'd probably pick more of the vegetarian or vegan diets because I could get more fiber, and that's been proven to literally help with more biomarkers compared to the ketogenic diet, where I could potentially eat more fats and have a bit more of the side effects. And that decrease of fiber also increases my risk of having higher cholesterol and a whole other slew of other biomarkers that can contribute to still having type 2 diabetes and prediabetes. Because the other things that people should know with an A1C score, that's just measuring what the average is over the 3 months or 90 days. And generally, I prefer having a lot more tests done where it's not just looking at the A1C scores. I also want to look at what's my fasted insulin scores, because that would dictate more of how my body is effectively utilizing insulin, because insulin resistance, root cause of type 2 diabetes. So why not measure the actual thing with insulin as well? Another thing too is a oral glucose tolerance stress test. So it's taking some grams of sugars and seeing how your body can effectively utilize those blood sugars from moving it from our gut into our blood, and then our blood into our brain and our muscles. And generally, whenever we would see a spike, it should come down appropriately. But then for those with insulin resistance, it could spike up, but then it would stay higher because of the insulin resistance. So it's having a harder time actually, the insulin is having a hard time actually moving the blood sugars into the muscles and into the brain and the rest of the body appropriately. That's why it lingers up higher and it causes more complications of the blood vessels, and it's not a good time. And having fiber and more protein, it does aid in moving it back into those ranges. And for those on a keto diet, since they just are avoiding the problem entirely of not eating any carbs whatsoever, that becomes a huge issue, because once we actually do a stress test on them, what are the chances that they're actually going to have a pass test? It's not as likely, because increases of triglycerides, cholesterol, and those other factors that can impact insulin resistance and sensitivity, not in the best of ways. So it can actually make it worse at times if they were to ever reintroduce carbohydrates back into their life because they love eating sweets, bread, or those other factors. But if someone just hates bread and hates sweets and just doesn't like carbs in general, then the keto diet might be beneficial for someone. Or if they have other conditions that isn't as suitable for it, because it's not just diabetes that we're working with, it could be a whole other slew of other factors. Like if someone has allergies towards certain proteins in a vegetable that they cannot eat any vegetables, then keto diet may be significantly helpful. So that's why I'm putting it in the D tier rather than those other tiers over there, because it has some implication and use for other folks. Okay, so the next tip that we're going to talk about, it is doing chores like folding laundries while we're standing up, throwing away the trash, cleaning up the cupboards, washing the tables. So in case if someone isn't able to go for a walk and they are just tied up with their time, then I generally recommend people to do 15 to 20 minutes of more chores like washing the dishes, something that's more active, so that it could still involve utilizing the muscles to lower those blood sugars and improve one's ability to be effective with their time and also doing other things with it. Preferably, I believe walking would have more benefits per se compared to those other tips. So with that being said, I will put this in an A tier. I get it if someone is not able to walk or have those other factors, doing chores is a great alternative to still effectively manage those blood sugars appropriately and improve one's effects in that. And of course, this is just my bias rating of this scale. Take this as you may. I'm just rating it based off of the responses that I've had from the clients that I've worked with, their compliments and feedback based off the research and science, and stuff that I've used to help reverse my prediabetes and kept it reversed for about 2 years now. So just sharing the insights with y'all and see how it works for you. And if you don't like any of these things, go ahead. Like, this is just for information purposes and maybe opening our eyes to new things. Okay. The next thing I want to show, it is doing the carnivore diet. So no carbs, vegetables whatsoever, and just only having meats and more proteins. I'm going to put this in the same category for keto diet, where it's eliminating all carbs, carnivore diet in the same boat here. It really depends on the person, but some factors that I also looked at as well for the keto diet, since there's a decrease in the amount of fiber that is being added into the diet, that's also something that should be aware of, not to mention some of the micronutrients that can be talked about. And if someone does not like eating organ meats, where generally whenever someone is on the carnivore diet, from what I've seen and from what I've tested out and tried for myself, like the organ meats such as beef liver and like chicken liver or those other things, where someone does not like eating that whatsoever to get their nutrients in, then I don't really think the keto diet or the carnivore diet is going to be really as helpful, because it's hard to actually get more of the nutrients that one is looking for on that diet. Not to mention the decreased amount of fiber generally whenever someone is on this diet, that it makes it harder at times to actually have more health benefits from it. So with that being said, I'm going to put that on the D tier and leaving it there. For some cases, it might be helpful for some people. Other cases, it may not be helpful. So that's why I put it at D rather than in F tier. All right, the next thing is running. So running, most people generally go too hard for running, where they think they have to sprint it out and go all out, and it demoralizes them and they have a hard time getting back into it. Not to mention for other folks, where if they start to run and it's just uncomfortable and they just don't know the appropriate pacing at times, they might not find it fun at all. And the reason why I also say that too is if someone does enjoy running, that's a great option and opportunity. But if someone doesn't like it, trying to get from the steps to learn how to get into running and doing it slowly and easing into it, like the benefits are going to be amazing. And it's also depends on the person if they want to run or not. Like benefits are amazing in preserving joint health, improving the strength and aerobic capacity of somebody to go on those runs. If it's enjoyable for them, doing it outdoors, from my perspective, is better than doing it indoors. But if I'm running indoors while watching a TV screen to distract myself, that's also a good time too. So it depends on the person for this. And since a variety of people tend to go way too hard, I'm just going to put this in the B tier. Don't get me wrong. I think runners, like if they are able to develop it and they feel great and they feel amazing, then you could definitely put that onto the S tier on there. But the reason why I'm putting it on B tier is because some people just don't like running, and that's completely okay. And if someone wants to get into running, doing it very slowly first, of doing like a light jog and gradually building up to it. It does take time, it does take some effort, but once they actually receive all of them, they're able to break through and have a better time with their running, because they're able to overcome the time that they're building up their endurance to achieve the spot that they want to achieve. So hence why I put that in the B. But if someone already loves running, you could definitely put that in the S tier. And I'm just basing it off of my insights on that. Okay, so restrictive eating. So eliminating all sugars, all carbs, and those factors on there, because they think sugars are the enemy, processed foods, all that stuff. I'm going to put this in the F tier because that has significant mental health complications and implications, where if someone is deciding, oh, I'm going to not eat sugars at all whatsoever because it's going to cause my blood sugars to rise, I think that's a horrendous mindset and perspective to have. Because if I say, don't think of a pink elephant, what do we think of? A pink elephant, right? So if I say, I'm not going to have that candy bar, I'm not going to have this, I'm not going to have that, we're already thinking of the foods that we're restricting. So that makes us want it to crave it even more compared to actually having it. It's very similar to whenever someone is single versus being in a relationship. So for someone who's single, like they're fine, no one's really going to talk to them or attempt to have conversations with them. But once they get into a relationship, all of a sudden the other people that they have chatted with in the past starts talking with them more, because now they can't have that person, so they want them even more. So because of that restrictive thinking and trying to do a full out, I'm not going to do this anymore, that can lead to a lot of yo dieting and make it hard for someone to actually improve their ability to enjoy and savor those foods and have a smarter approach with it. Because if we can actually have those sugars, which we can, just pairing it more with fiber, more with protein, and then going on the walk afterwards or physical activity afterwards, that's going to significantly improve one's ability to still enjoy what are the foods or sweets that they enjoy. So if it's some chocolate or candy or a croissant or any traditional cultural foods that they love, they can have it. It's just balancing it with more protein, more fiber, and going on the walk afterwards to achieve their goals for having that. And eliminating the chances of even developing an eating disorder or risk of disordered eating. Because I've had this experience happen to me when I was cutting out food entirely when I did wrestling back in high school. And the hard thing was I was about 155 pounds, I believe, and I dropped, and I was about 10% body fat. Within 3 weeks of me just eating like a chicken breast about this size and broccoli, like unseasoned, it was just horrendous. Did that for 3 solid weeks, and I lost about 10 pounds. So I weighed about 140 pounds or like 143 pounds, around that range. And I noticed this time where my family members were starting to eat this, uh, the coconut macarons. And for me, that just looked so good at the time that I decided to eat one of them. But I just felt good in that moment, but instantly felt disgusted about myself that I spat that entire thing out, felt ashamed and guilty and feeling like a complete failure. And that's the feeling that is on repeat that I've had for many years, and I do not wish that upon anybody. Now I can say I have a better relationship with food now that I understand how our body utilizes foods appropriately, that I'm able to improve my health, improve my ability to actually enjoy and savor foods, and pair it with other habits so that I can balance the things that I want. Because it's all about a balance. It's not about eliminating one entire thing and then only going all in for those other things, that it could cause the issues for some people. Additionally, if one is able to make those healthy habits for themselves while in situations where it may seem tempting, that's going to improve one's ability to continually say no to those temptations a lot better and having a better time with it. So, for example, if someone's deciding to go out to have some drinks and eat food with friends, if their friends are saying, "Hey, try this drink or try this food and everything," and that there isn't enough protein or fiber to actually counterbalance those habits, like saying no to them, you could totally do that. Or you could say, "Oh, I can definitely have that. And I'm going to tell my friends to go on a walk afterwards with me so that I could help my blood sugars move into my muscles so I could use that off and have a better relationship with food and good time and all those aspects." That you could totally do that. And you could definitely improve your health that way too and still have the things that you want. So there's that for y'all's. Okay. The next thing we're going to talk about is stretching. So, with stretching, if someone wants to pull it over, hold it for 30 seconds, they feel some relief, or some people may feel tight. Based off the research that I've seen and from my own personal experience, stretching provides a temporary relief, and sure, you may have more range of motion. However, you're losing more strength because of it, because now you're increasing the nerves' mobility, and that's not a good thing because you want your nerves that are more sensitive and more tight so that it can send the signals a lot faster. And something that I relate this to is if someone has Wi-Fi, if they put more barriers between their Wi-Fi signal compared to their electronic devices, it's going to have a harder time actually moving along through. And similar with stretching, that if we decide to stretch, that's going to cause decreased strength at the cost of more range of motion and some temporary effects that could actually prolong recovery rates, that I think there's better alternatives compared to stretching. Isometrics or muscle squeezes, doing that for 5 seconds, 5 times, or for 30 seconds, that's going to improve turning on the muscles so that it can improve range of motion, increase strength, and generally it's a lot more effective compared to actually just stretching in general. So with that being said, I'm going to put stretching at the F tier because of that reason. So if someone enjoys doing yoga, the difference between yoga and passive stretching is that yoga, you're moving in and out of those motions. So you're not doing a passive stretch, you're doing an active and dynamic movement. So an eccentric and concentric movement of moving in and out, and then doing an isometric hold or a muscle squeeze, that people get stretching wrong for the terminology. But yoga is definitely great because you can move in and out of it. And based off the definition of terminology, that's not stretching at all. Instead, that is a dynamic movement and controlled movement, whereas stretching, it's just literally decreasing the potential of the nerves to actually send the signal to the muscles to contract appropriately, stabilize the joint, and keep it in a safer position. So isometrics, muscle squeezes, yoga, definitely do those. Passive stretching, I don't recommend it for folks. All right. So the next thing that's on this list is indirect sunlight, or getting outside and having some more sunlight. Generally, for people with type 2 diabetes and prediabetes, if they are struggling with high morning blood sugars, the response is called Don's phenomenon, where whenever we're sleeping and we wake up, we're going to have a release of the stress hormones like cortisol, epinephrine, to wake us up. And that's the requirement for it. So that's why our blood sugars are going to be a bit higher, because those stress hormones stimulates our liver to release more glucose or the sugars to raise our blood sugars so that it can move it to our muscles and our brain to get it ready for the day. But for those with type 2 diabetes and prediabetes, whenever they wake up and they have that groggy mind, a lot of it is due to that insulin resistance, where insulin is having a harder time moving those blood sugars into the brain and into the rest of the body during the morning time. So that's why they feel groggy and not that great in the morning, is because the brain is literally starving for more blood sugars that's not actually getting to their brain. So one of the tips to help reduce those stress hormones in the morning is getting indirect sunlight. Like whenever one is wakes up, get those shoes on, put a jacket on if you need to, and walk outside. And if the sun's shining through at me, I'm gonna look down so that I can get indirect sunlight into my eyes. I would never look directly in the sun because that can cause permanent eye damage. But instead, if I look indirectly at it or whenever it's cloudy, I'm still getting the benefits of having positive hormones like serotonin to allow my body to be released, to move those blood sugars effectively into my brain and my muscles, to lower my blood sugars and improve my metabolism throughout the day by decreasing those stress hormones and having a better time in improving my health. So with that being said, just doing it for 10 minutes outside, amazing, phenomenal. And if one is able to walk outside while getting indirect sunlight, double whammy. Like I would put that as a double S tier for the implications. And that's one of the best ways to lower high blood sugars in the morning, to reverse the DONS phenomenon for a normal event that happens for people. So the next thing that I want to talk about, it is time. And time plays a huge role in a lot of our metabolism and our sleep and wake cycles because of this thing called our circadian rhythm. So our circadian rhythm and our body, it has this internal clock where it can dictate, okay, I'm going to wake up at this time, feel sleepy around this time, I feel hungry at these certain periods. That if we can utilize this to our advantage appropriately, this can actually improve our metabolism A1C scores significantly better compared to those who do not have the scheduled routine. So if we're able to wake up at the same time each morning, no pressing that alarm or trying to sleep in, because if we sleep in, then that stress cycle occurs again where we're releasing more of the cortisol and epinephrine. So blood sugars rise up again, and it's harder for it to get back down. And we try to go back to sleep because of the alarm, and that cycle repeats over and over again. Then that's just going to leave more of the stress hormones built up. So it's going to be harder for our body to actually have a better metabolism throughout the day. So it's better to wake up just that one time and then go outside, and receiving that sunlight actually helps set our circadian rhythm through the day, saying, okay, I'm good here. And then setting regular eating times. I'm going to eat at 8 o'clock in the morning for breakfast, 11 o'clock for lunch. And then for dinner, I'm going to have it around 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock. That works perfectly. And then going to bed at a reasonable hour, 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, avoiding electronics 2.5 hours before, same thing with dinner and such. That significantly improves our body's response in reestablishing our hormonal levels throughout the day, improving our metabolism, and helping our body understand a routine and a schedule to have a better time with it. And circadian rhythm, once we master that, phenomenal things can happen. And then for those who do not utilize the circadian rhythms appropriately, for example, people who work the night shifts where they're not getting the sunlight to help establish their circadian rhythm appropriately, and they're not having a regular eating schedule at times, that there are studies that people who work like overnight shifts consistently, that they have increased A1C scores, increased other health complications, because they're not being able to have an established circadian rhythm, getting the appropriate sunlight to release more of the positive hormones to establish the routine, that it can have health consequences because of that. Because that just means the body's more stressed when we're not utilizing the cycle appropriately. So timing meals, timing when we go to bed and waking up appropriately and being smart about it, that can help blood sugars tremendously. So putting that on S tier. Okay. You I need to say any more for using a food scale or measuring cups for people's foods for portion control? S tier, easily. Because if we're able to read the nutrition label and actually measure things out appropriately, we know what's going into our body and we know how it's going to respond to it. And if we're smart about that, we're able to control our calories of what's going in, and then being smart about what nutrients are coming in too. and having an easier time with it. Because the more we're actually aware of what am I eating, that gives us more power of what information of how we can predict this is going to affect our body. Because from my perspective, a lot of people who are terrified about their blood sugars going high for absolutely no reason whatsoever, it's because they're not measuring their food appropriately and measuring like how much sauce is being put in, how much salt is being put in. And if one is actually able to measure that out, see how their body responds to it, and then go on those walks when they need to lower their blood sugars more, seeing how fiber and protein can actually blunt how high those blood sugars can get from it, that's going to be significantly more helpful in allowing one to manage their health appropriately and mastering their ability to do that. Investing into a food scale or measuring cups, highly recommend it. So there's that. All right. The other thing, it is special ointments, ancient ointments, or other gels and creams to help with lowering type 2 diabetes and prediabetes. It depends on the cream and the ointments that are being used. I generally prefer like the lotion being put on top of the foot and the bottom of the foot so that I can improve my moisture of my skin and decrease the risk of developing any cuts or bruises that could lead to infections or an amputation down the road. So being able to do my daily foot inspections and then putting the appropriate lotion on the bottom and top of my foot, that's great in prevention. However, if it's a pain cream or some sort of medication where someone's or more of a pain cream or ancient medicine that people are claiming to do all these wonderful effects, let's look at the track record. There's so many people that's already using it, and how come when they do use it, it's actually not having an impact on their blood sugars or anything at all. Like I go on Facebook a lot of the times, and this is just my personal opinion and bias, people are promoting these magical creams and these other ointments. Why are they in those groups and they're still complaining about their blood sugars being out of control despite having this supposed cure to improve their type 2 diabetes and prediabetes and their blood sugars? Like that just doesn't make sense to me. Of you've done this for so long, yet you're not actually receiving the results. Like you're still in the ranges of having the blood sugars that are still out of control, and it's just not responding well to it because they're not using science to their advantage. That, from my perspective, if it is the lotion by itself for the foot to prevent amputations of wrist, like I'd put this in S tier. But then for someone saying that ancient medicine does all these things, but it's actually not helping them based off the research and science and their own personal experience, like they're trying to have that placebo effect where it's trying to work and it actually works, but it's actually not working at all. So, because they're using a continuous glucose monitor or like a glucometer to check what their blood sugars are after they applied the ancient medicine or those creams, and it doesn't do anything to their blood sugars or it makes it worse, then I'd put that at F tier. Because of that polarity of depending on the advantages for it, I'll just leave this at the C right in the middle, where if it is the creams to help prevent amputations by increasing moisture of the skin of our feet and the rest of our bodies, S tier. But if it's the other ones where people are just getting it and they think it's going to help, but it's actually not helping, complete F tier. That's bogus. That's garbage, in my opinion. And if you use it and it actually does work and it has a good placebo effect, then great, keep doing it. But if you can tell that you're using a glucometer and it's not actually helping and it's a waste of the investment, not a great time. So putting that on C tier. And if I get a lot of hate for it, that's just my personal opinion. Say what you want. I'm just providing the information that I've seen that's out there and trying to help some folks make a better educated decision on things. Okay, the next thing, raspberries, blueberries, berries in general, and fruits. And from my perspective, raspberries is one of the superfoods that are out there for type 2 diabetes and prediabetes. And if you are interested in learning other superfoods for diabetes management, feel free to check out the description of this video, check the pinned comments, because I have a free ebook for 10 superfoods to manage type 2 diabetes and prediabetes. That's perfect for blood sugars, and it's able to help out with that. And the reason why I love raspberries and blackberries in particular is because how much fiber they have for each cup. Like a cup of raspberries has 8 freaking grams of fiber. And if our goal is to try and get 45 to 55 grams of fiber each day, like that cup already puts me at almost 20% of the values that I need for that day. Like that's phenomenal. That's amazing. Like freaking S tier for that. And then blueberries, great for the brain health. It's not as much fiber compared to the other ones, but fruit in general, people may have the argument of, oh, fructose is really bad for you. It's not a good time because it clogs up your liver and those things. That's a complete myth because there are research studies that are out there where participants came in and they were fed things that are higher in saturated fats and then things that are higher in fructose. And they found that the ones who consume more of those saturated fats in excess, they have significantly higher risk of type 2 diabetes. Well, they have significantly worse health markers for their liver enzymes and a few other health for their health markers compared to those who like consumed fructose. And that's the thing where saturated fats are considered more inflammatory or leading to more excess inflammation compared to the effects of like just fructose in general without devoided of the fiber and such. So with that stake, for someone who's trying to figure out fructose is bad for you, in reality, no, fructose actually isn't that bad for you if you have it in moderation. Like it doesn't have that much of an effect, especially when you eat more fiber, then that's going to help offset all the things that's going to be going on with the fructose argument that people do have. So there's my thoughts. And majority of the time, even with the regular soda pop, when they do use high fructose corn syrup and those other things, like it's not 100% fructose. Like there's still like different percentages of the fructose and the glucose and those other things that's in there that it's not complete fructose. And for that other study that I looked at, and I'll cite the source down below, Dr. Bio Lane does a good job in talking about fructose with this of how that affects all those things. So like fruits, eat your fruits. It's completely good for us, especially raspberries and blackberries if one is able to. That has way more fiber, best bang for its buck for that stuff, and it's a good time for that. Okay, the next thing, diet sodas, artificial sweeteners. So many folks that are out there, when they say, oh, it's not natural, artificial, it's disgusting and bad for us, and it causes all these different things. My question for those people is, how come for those who do drink the diet sodas and all those things, they're not actually developing the cancers or the other insane things that people are talking about? Like they say, oh, there's going to be a huge insulin spike or a huge insulin response, when in reality, where's the evidence that actually supports that? Because there's plenty of research articles that shows for the non-nutritive sweeteners, so the artificial sweeteners or zero-calorie sweeteners, that doesn't have an impact on blood sugars or any meaningful impact in blood sugars compared to actually eating the regular sugars that are out there for those sodas. By that logic, it's not that great. And generally for the studies that people say of, oh, it does cause cancer, because if you look at the study, it says people who drink it, the diet sodas, have more cancer. One of the things that Dr. Bio Lane does a good job in is breaking down the reverse causality, because for an observational study, they just look at the people who are drinking diet sodas or non-nutritive sweetened beverages compared to those who are drinking it, that the ones who are drinking the diet versions of it, they have more obesity rates, more cancer rates, and those other things compared to those who aren't drinking it. We also look at it for those groups, the person in the category for the artificial sweeteners, they already have higher, like that higher BMI, so more of those obesity rates, and they also have more of those higher cancer rates. So they're drinking more of the artificial sweeteners because they know that they have an issue and they're trying to do an alternative option compared to what they've done in the past that could have led to their situation there. So is it because they're actually drinking it that's causing it, or is it because they have that they're drinking it, and that's why the results are skewed in the observational data? So that's just from my perspective of how that is. I'll be honest too, like I drink the artificial sweeteners and stuff, and my blood work, it still looks really good from the A1C standpoint and those other standpoints. And same thing with my other clients, like they drink the non-nutritive sweeteners or the artificial sweetener stuff, and like their health markers has never looked like better than before. So I leave that up to people. Like if they want to drink something that is more natural and they prefer it that way because their body makes it better, go for you. Like good for you, do what you want. But for those who are debating between actually using the artificial sweeteners or non-nutritive sweeteners to improve their health, for that, like there's no research that says that it's actually bad for you. Again, I'm not promoting to drink the artificial sweeteners over anything else. I'm just saying it's still a good alternative for those who do want to have something to address sweet tooth craving. while being able to maintain their blood sugar levels to make it a bit happier and watching their calories. Like, it's a great option from that perspective. So because of that, I'm going to put that in B tier because of the benefits that it can provide for someone wanting to address their sweet tooth craving and those other aspects compared to drinking like some of the other beverages, like your regular soda or those other things there. Like, in my opinion, that is the better option of what I would do for myself. And I just go from there. So there's that. All right. The other thing that I've talked about, so pairing protein and fiber with carbs, S tier, amazing. If someone is able to have the 45 to 55 grams of fiber dispersed out through all of their meals, and then their protein, 1 gram of protein for however much pounds that they weigh, dispersed throughout the meals as well, like that is going to significantly improve one's ability to manage their carb intake, their protein intake, and their fiber intake so that their blood sugars are going to look a lot better compared to those who are choosing not to do that. Because the protein and the fiber helps slow down the rate of which the sugars are going to move from the like gut into the blood and into the muscles appropriately. And by slowing down that process, it's very similar to drinking from 5 fire hoses versus drinking from the 1 fire hose. We just need to drink from the 1 fire hose for now, not all 5 at the same time, and then it just suddenly shuts off when we have the same amount of water that's in there. So it's better to do it more of that flow state where it is more slower and helping us improve those blood sugar levels where it's not going to spike super high up and then crash all the way down quickly. Instead, it's more sustained and easier with that. So there you go. Okay. The next thing that we're going to talk about it is heel raises. So as you can see here, their feet are flat and then they raise their feet up and you just repeat back and forth. Whenever someone is in the car and or driving for a long commute and their blood sugars tend to be a bit higher, especially when they need to eat some food that's inside of their car, doing this is such a great option compared to the other like things that are out there. For example, if you don't do anything at all, then blood sugars are going to be a lot higher too. Then it's not going to be going anywhere. So at least doing something, or whenever someone's in their office and they finished up their break and they don't have time to lower their blood sugars, just doing this or fidgeting, that's going to be super helpful. Like I will say, walking is definitely better. So if one is able to, if they're driving and their blood sugars are high, like parking off to the side of the road and just walking back and forth, that's going to be more helpful. But if that's not a feasible option, then just doing the heel lifts and alternating it back and forth and moving our torso side to side or fidgeting, that's going to be super beneficial in still decreasing the amount of the blood sugars there are because it's able to still get to some of those muscles to improve one's ability to manage the blood sugars appropriately. For that reason, I'm just going to put that on A tier because something is better than nothing. And doing that, completely helpful whenever someone's in a pinch. Okay, resistance training. So as I said before, if we have the muscles that are more active, that's going to improve the body's ability to manage those blood sugars more appropriately because it's able to shift from the blood into the muscles. And when the muscles are active, it actually doesn't need as much insulin. So it improves the insulin sensitivity to move those blood sugars into the muscle, use it off effectively, and have a better time with it. So with that being said, I'll put that on S tier because additionally, whenever one does resistance training and they're building up their strength, one of the awesome things is increasing that muscle mass can also decrease the amount of fat that is inside of those muscles. If this is the first time someone hearing that fat can be found inside of muscles, that is completely true. Because if we are sedentary and not doing anything, and there's the sugars that are in our muscle that's not being used off as fuel, it can be converted into fats because fats is more of a storage unit for the sugars to allow us to exercise and move. So if we have excess calories, we build up more fat because of that. Law of thermodynamics. And by being able to do more resistance training and increasing the metabolic demand for the sugars in our body, we're able to decrease the amount of the fat inside of our muscles and improve more of that like muscle mass appropriately to become more insulin sensitive and improving our overall health. And then for the folks who think, oh, if I lift weights, I'm going to become bulky. That is completely false because even for the people who look like okay at the gym or decent at the gym, Like it took them years of effort to actually look as good as they did to get to that point. And majority of the time, people don't get bulky just by lifting one set of weights. Like they would have to get really strict on eating their diets, doing a cutting season where they're restricting their calories so much to try and look that lean and that bulky that majority of people don't get to that state because they're not doing as intense cutting for their food to reach to that level and training that competitively to look like that. There's a reason why bodybuilders, when they have those competitions, that they're doing so many other different things to get there that it's very hard for people who are just starting out to actually get there appropriately. Like it takes a lot of freaking time for it. Like some people, like for me, I'm trying to work out a ton, I'm trying to eat and everything, and I don't have these massive boulder shoulders or this freaking like wood neck or a body that is like extremely big and huge. And I'm still like, I would like to get bigger shoulders and bigger arms and like bigger legs, but I've been doing this for years and I still look like this. So that just goes to show that despite me doing all these other factors and still doing resistance training, that people are not going to look like that bulky. They're still going to look pretty slimmed down and more regular because of that when they do resistance training. So there's that aspect for folks. I wish I could get bulky if it just took a few lifts to get to that point. But that's not how our body works. That's not how reality works. Unfortunately for me, because I want to get bulky. This next one, supplements. As the name implies, supplements are good when the basics are mastered. And I've talked about majority of the basics that are all through here, that if one's able to do that, majority of the time, but if someone is doing a diet, so for example, if they're doing the carnivore diet or the keto diet, they need more fiber, then taking a fiber supplement is great. Or even people with type 2 diabetes or prediabetes who just aren't getting enough fiber in their diet, like a fiber supplement is amazing. But for the things like, oh, this magical supplement is going to cure everything, that's the similar thing that I had with the ointments that I talked about in the category C, where there's probably a good risk of it being a sham, or someone saying, oh, this is an organic supplement and it's X, Y, and Z things can have these benefits. I will say this, that supplement that someone's getting is way more processed compared to a burger that they would get from McDonald's. Like it's so scattered down into it's more fine size that compared to the McDonald's where it at least has some shape or form of a beef patty or those other things that are there. So those supplements, ultra processed, also same thing as the burgers. So take your pick for those other factors. The processed stuff isn't bad for people. Like whenever we chew foods, that's going to become processed. Another thing that most people aren't aware of, and I made another video about it too, and feel free to check that out. But a general thing is whenever someone does get supplements, it's not regulated by the Food and Drug Administration for verifying what they're putting on their label. Like someone can put whatever they want into a supplement and claim it has these things, but it can actually not contain any of those things, and they could still sell it off the market for that. So with that reason, like if I was in the case between picking a supplement versus picking a medication, like I'd rather pick the medication because there's a lot more security and fine control with it compared to trying to take a supplement. And again, it depends on the person's case because, like I said, a fiber supplement, like I would generally value that more compared to some of the other medications that are out there. But it also depends. Is it third party tested? Is it verified? And going through that list of processes of doing my research, are they actually valid for what they're claiming and moving on through there? So depends on what you're interested in. But because of the reason where a lot of supplements, in my opinion, is more of a horrendous thing where some people are just trying to take advantage of other people by using the terms natural ingredients or those other things, and they're demonizing another food or that other background, that I'd hold more salt to it because food is just food. It's just information and it feeds different parts of our bodies, whether it is physical health, emotional health, or mental health, or those other factors. So there's a time and place for everything. And supplements, it gets tricky because some people are making false claims about that supplements versus actually being true to those values. So because of how hectic it is, where supplements, like if they go third party tested, it can be helpful. Others that don't do it or not as verified, I take those with a grain of salt. So because this is all hairy waters, like if it was just a fiber supplement that was really great for all these other factors, I'd put that in an S tier. If it's like berberine or the cinnamon or turmeric, like I'd probably put that more in the B tier. But if it was someone claiming that this magical supplement cures everything, I'd put that even worse than an F tier. So because of everything being scattered, I'm just going to give this an average C. All right, last two things for this. Water. Hydration is really good. So if we think about water this way, where if we're drinking, if we have a cup of water and then we have a cup of sugar and we were to mix all those together, that ratio is more about how our blood sugars are. So if we decide to drink more water, so if we add another cup of water to it, technically that ratio gets lower for the blood sugar. So we would have lower blood sugars because we're actually hydrated and it's going to be a lot better for us. So because of that, I put that at an A. And then if we're dehydrated, so if we're sick, for example, or we sweat a lot and we lose more water, same thing as imagine boiling the water and then more of the water coming out. So you have this just super sweet liquid mixture with the sugar and even less water, that it will have a higher ratio of the sugars compared to that water. Similar thing for our blood sugars, where it's going to be that similar aspect for it. And the reason why I put that on A tier is because if we have water combined with electrolytes, so if we have this thing called the element or liquid IV or those other ones where the electrolytes can actually help move the water from the rest of our gut lining into our muscles, into our brain a lot more effectively if it was just compared to water alone. Again, it depends on the person's situation. If they're not able to have as much sodium because they're not sweating that much or they have other health conditions, then being mindful of that. Additionally, looking at how much sugars is inside an electrolyte packet. If someone's going to be more cognizant of their sugar intake, that's going to be a factor too. But if someone is also working out and they actually need more sugars to fuel their muscles to do the workout, then having some more sugars inside that electrolyte mix would be good. But because of its versatility, generally for the electrolyte mix and packets, it's going to be a lot better compared to taking water alone. So with that being said, I put that on S tier. So there's my final rating of that. Feel free to let me know your comments below of what you think of this. I'll cite the sources of things below too for the diet sodas and for the other things that I have mentioned. And if y'all do have any questions, feel free to let me know. I'd appreciate it if you enjoyed this content. If you would subscribe, hit that notification bell for updates, share it with a friend. It'd help them out. And I'll see y'all in the next video, and like this video too. Thank you.